Oh hey, I'm glad you're here. Growing up in a video store meant a behind-the-scenes ticket to the excitement. I had the promos before the movie released, I had access to the new releases before they hit the shelves, I got first crack at all the promotional materials. One year we had over 20 special Fantasia Christmas ornaments on our Christmas tree because each clamshell box came with one shrink wrapped to it. So we just put them up at Christmas time. But I was also there so much that I got bored. I have more than one memory of my dad giving me $1 to go next door to the Putt and Video, which was a miniature golf/arcade, where I'd stroll past Dragon Slayer, Burger Time, Tapper, and APB to the candy counter, where I would spend my dollar on a healthy dose of Laffy Taffy and those round little jerky coins. Yeah. Then I'd leave the arcade, passing by Discs Tron, the Popeye Cocktail Table, Shinobi, Gauntlet. Yeah, I took a different route. Once back in the store, I just sit down in the aisle like horror and I just eat my treasure. Maybe set off the Frankenhooker box that would say, "Want a date?" Or squeeze the blood around on the bleeder box, which had like a layer of fake blood you could move around on it. Or just rock in front of the Demon Wind box as the lenticular cover would show the demon burst through the window and back. Not every moment was busy, and so you were just sitting waiting for something to happen, which kind of felt like everything in a small town. All you'd see on TV was things happening somewhere else. Music especially, it all came from somewhere else. The bands were all playing somewhere else. And in my teen years, one type of music would become a favorite of all my friends, and that music became, for some of them, their style and their way of life. I'm talking about punk, which brings us to this episode, but first, I wanted to thank you all. I want to thank you for listening this season. There have been some crazy highlights this season, like talking to Psycho Gorman, Sarah Burns returning to talk David Lynch, Carmelita joined us to talk about my favorite movie of all time, The Reflecting Skin, and on and on. If you were a guest, sincerely, thank you for your time and efforts. If you wrote a review or you subscribed, thank you so much. If you told someone to listen, thank you. Seriously. This podcast means a lot to me, and all of you listening really is something special. So while we're on break, please take an opportunity to hear any episode you've missed. I can honestly say every guest has been absolutely wonderful. But let's get to this episode. The film is Dudes. My guest is a punk, and this is VH Us. Hello, and welcome to VHS, the podcast where each episode is about a film and the guest has the profession portrayed in the film. I'm your host, Dirk Marshall, and I hope you'll find us on Instagram and Twitter at VHUS_podcast. I'm also on Letterboxd as Dirk Marshall. I'm terrible at it, but I swear I'm going to get better.
I don't even know what that is.
It's where people log all the things they watch, and I never do it. But I'm going to, I swear. But Twitter's where you'll find our giveaways, original artwork created by Selena Cordero. But I'm joined by my co-host for Season 9, Sarah Marshall. How are you?
I'm great. Our house is overcoming a sickness,
yes.
So I'm here.
Great.
That's enough.
That's all we can ask for, really. How is Meaningful Marketplace?
Good. It's really good. We have kind of focused on restaurants a little bit this month to try to get people to go to them. So female-owned restaurants. There's some really great ways that they have to support people in the community. So I think if you listen to them, even if you're not here in town, they'll get you thinking about how to support your restaurants locally, I think. So listen in.
Yes, definitely. This is the final episode of Season 9. This is your first season that you were a part of this podcast. So how are you feeling?
Well, I mean, I haven't received my contract for next season, so hopefully I get the job again.
Would you come back for Season 10?
Totally.
Okay, great. Well, he's waited long enough. Our guest for this episode is Raphael Jose Martinez. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I am really excited because I'm a longtime listener and fan of your podcast.
Well, thank you so much. You're here as our torch carrier for punk, but also you have a podcast called Generation Splice Podcast. Please fill in our listeners on what that is.
Yeah, it's a podcast that I do with my mom, actually. That was her idea of all things. My mom and I would go to movies whenever we could get the chance and then argue literally the entire car ride back, and she eventually was like, we should just record our arguments and put them on the internet. And I thought, that's what the internet's for, arguments. So we do that. And it's just going over films throughout time, old films, current films in theaters, recent releases, and just looking at it from our different perspectives, as she's, a baby boomer who's an immigrant, and I'm, her child that was born to, a middle-class family in the United States. So it's definitely different perspectives, and we kind of are trying to splice together the generation gap, as we say, by talking about film.
Yeah, it's great. You've had some wonderful guests on.
Oh, you've been a guest?
Yeah, I was on for Serial Mom. That was really fun.
Yeah, that was a great episode.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. Also, on Twitter, you're Giallo Biafra, which is like the best Twitter handle I think anyone could have. Now, as a representative of punk, just tell us a little bit about what punk means to you, what flavors you appreciate most, just so we lay the groundwork here.
Oh, man, I was one of those people that when I first heard punk and first learned of it, I just dove in and never got out of that pool. I was in my first band when I was like 12 years old and started making zines when I was like 13.
Yeah.
I'm all about all kinds of punk, really. I love all the weird, different little sub-tribes within it. I love the little fashion differences and quirks between all the crusty kids with their, dreadlocks and black denim patches and stuff like that, but then also the cool looking, the good skinhead guys, the anti-racist skinhead guys with their sharp boots and their super clean cut Fred Perry shirt. I kind of love it all, and I've made my life in punk just trying to learn about all the different groups and listen to as much as I can, because if you're into that kind of stuff, you really will find out that even if you like pop punk and the most saccharine Josie and the Pussycats style pop punk, you probably have more in common with somebody that listens to the most ridiculously knuckle-dragging, brutal hardcore than you do with somebody who has never been involved with the culture whatsoever.
Yeah, that's great. I had friends in high school who got very into punk, and I had friends that went straight up crustcore, gnarly, and it was amazing to see someone find that and be like, this is what I'm into. And they have, I don't even know what it's called, the butt flap that they get into.
Yeah, the butt flaps. I miss the butt flaps of the 90s to the early 2000s.
Oh, okay. So they're not butt flapping anymore in the punk scene? But
I haven't really seen a butt flap in a while, which makes me sad.
Yeah.
In my band about 15 years ago, we tried to bring back the butt flap.
Nice.
Everybody just used them as back patches. And we're just like, you can, but that's not what we intended.
Yeah, it was the one thing that I saw where I was like, that's a new accessory. Everything else when I was, in the 90s, it was all 30 years ago. That's when the 60s came back or whatever, and people were dressing and like that. But the butt flap, I was like, that's not from any other generation. Like that's new.
Yeah, when you talk about butt flaps, you definitely place yourself at a very particular time and place in punk history.
Yeah, I love it. Well, fantastic. Before we dive into the film, we have to tackle the big question. This is an extremely important question that's listener generated. I keep it, of course, in my little jewel case here.
Ooh.
And I will just give it a little shake, and we'll see what comes out here. This is something none of us are prepared for. This one comes from Luconian Logic. Lucas.
Hey, buddy.
Best death by fists scene in a movie. Oh, a scene where someone is punched to death.
He would ask that question.
He would.
Is it rage?
He's a rageful man, Lucas, if you're listening. I'm scared. Oof.
Punching death. I can't even think of any, but that's more your...
I think I watched one last night. I watched Mars, a 1997 movie starring Olivier Gruner. I've been going through all these Avi Nesher movies. It's not amazing, but punched to death. I mean, I have a Shaw Brothers box set right here that's full of movies where people are punched to death.
That's a lot of those.
Yeah.
The first thing that popped into my mind was one of my favorite, it's another kung fu movie, more culty even than the Shaw Brothers stuff, is Ricky O, the story
Oh,
of Ricky,
yes, yeah.
where he just kind of smashes somebody's head like with his two fists together, and it looks like it's almost like a tomato exploding.
Yeah, that my favorite part in that movie is where he gets his arms cut and he ties the tendons back together, like
Yeah.
literally ties them in a knot, and then moves his hand like that works. I was like,
Fixed. If only it was that
okay,
easy.
yeah. Oh man, I gotta go with Clash of the Ninjas, which is the Godfrey Ho movie I've talked about a lot of times. I have it right here, and I'll show you the cover. There it is.
Oh, that's a great cover.
Oh yeah, you see Cobra on the cover there. He's not in the movie.
That cover looks like it was transferred from some kid's notebook in detention.
Yeah.
It totally does. I love the blow darts
Yeah.
actively happening.
Yes. The best thing is that's the real cover. That's really what
Oh,
they
that's
went
great.
with. Cobra is not in the film. That's Paco. He was often called the like Italian Sylvester Stallone, which I think is an insult to Sylvester Stallone. But it's also known as the exploding ninja movie because when a ninja dies, they turn into a puff of cotton balls. It's really
Whoa,
That's cool.
yeah, it's really
fun.
amazing. So I think I have to go with that. So hopefully, Lucas, that answers that question for you. We're brought together by dudes from 1987. This is not a first time watch for you, I'm guessing.
This is actually only the second time I've ever seen this movie.
Yes.
I watched it last night and I had to track down the VHS because this movie just wasn't available for the longest time until I think it was like 2017. Shout Factory finally put it on DVD.
Yep.
So as a punk, this still felt very punk in the sense where you kind of had to know somebody who had a copy or know somebody that had a copy of a copy to ever watch it because it was just a rarity.
Yeah, so we had this in my dad's video store. So for me, a lot of things like this, it just seemed mainstream to me because I had access to it all the time. And then I would talk to people and they'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I'd be
Right.
like, John Cryer. And they're like, oh, you're thinking of this John Hughes movie. And I'm like, no, I'm talking about Dudes, the punk rock movie. We didn't have Suburbia, but my friend Aaron, his older brother, had rented it. So we were Penelope Spheris fans. And when Hiding Out came out and Dudes, these were like the two movies that when I think about me as a kid going, I'm going to be a man one day, like, what's that going to mean? John Cryer was the closest thing to what I thought I could be. I didn't think I could be Arnold Schwarzenegger or,
Right.
I wasn't going to be some crazy big buff dude. But the sensitive, kind of nerdy punk rock guy in this movie was like, hey, I could be that. He's not a jerk. He's got his heart in the right place and he's got friends. That's all I wanted out of life. I was like, I can do this. The synopsis for the film is Manhattan punkers on their way to Los Angeles become vigilantes when their friend is murdered by a gang of cutthroats. That's pretty accurate.
That's a good log line for it.
That's what happens. At the time of this recording, you can find it on Blu-ray, stream it on Amazon or YouTube. I will say the Blu-ray has some great new interviews with the cast, and it's awesome to see Penelope. Lucas, actually, who submitted that question, invited me to see the 35mm print of Dudes played at the Hollywood Theater here in Portland, Oregon, and Penelope Spheris was there.
That's cool.
Yeah, that was awesome. I, of course, recommend that you support your local video stores. Check and see if you have one in your town, like Movie Madness here in Portland, Oregon.
You can actually rent it at the video store that I work at, Facets Video, which is where I got it from.
Oh, well, there you go.
VHS. Yeah.
Facets. And where is that?
It's in Chicago.
Nice. It's directed by Penelope Spheris, who did A Decline of Western Civilization, Suburbia, Wayne's World, Black Sheep. Our cinematographer, this is crazy, is Robert Richardson, who did Wall Street, JFK, A Few Good Men, Kill Bill 1 and 2, Aviator. I mean, he's a beast of a cinematographer. And the legend is he went to them when he heard Dudes was being made and said, I want to work on this film. I want to shoot it. And they're like, you're a super accomplished cinematographer. We can't afford you. And he said, whatever your budget is, I'll do it. And I think that's amazing. That's incredible. And it's why the film looks so good. Our editor is Andy Horvich, who did Boys Next Door, Prison, Arena, Oblivion 2, Trancers 2. He did a ton of that level of film, which for me is very close to my heart. So I was very excited to see that. It's starring John Cryer, who had done No Small Affair, Pretty in Pink, Hot Shots, Hiding Out, and Superman 4 around this time. Daniel Roebuck, who had done Cave Girl, River's Edge, Project X. He's a real working actor. He loves horror films, so he's doing tons of bit parts there. He has 250 credits, soon to appear in Rob Zombie's The Munsters as Grandpa.
That's great.
There you go. And then, of course, Flea, who was in Suburbia, Nightmares, Thrashin', Less Than Zero, Back to the Future 1 and 2. He's in some band. I just can't place the...
Can't figure it out.
He was in Fear.
Oh, right. He was the bass player in Fear. It's so funny, when the Red Hot Chili Peppers started to become a thing, we had a cable access show called Panic that played music videos at 2 in the morning. And so they played like the first Red Hot Chili Peppers video I ever saw, which was a cover of Stevie Wonder. And my friend Devin, who eventually became one of the most punk people I've ever met, he was like, "Oh, this is what I'm into." And I was like, "I don't know, it's weird that it has the guy from Suburbia in it." And so I knew him before the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which is a fun little thing. We also have Catherine Mary Stewart in this movie, who is gorgeous. She was in The Apple, Weekend at Bernie's, The Last Starfighter, Dead Silent, and Night Flyers. And then Lee Ving, the singer from the punk band Fear that you just mentioned. He's the villain. He was in Flashdance, Streets of Fire, Grave Secrets, and in 2021's Danzig-directed film Death Rider in the House of Vampires.
Such a good villain.
Most importantly, he was the body in Clue.
Oh, right. He was in Clue as well as the body. Great one. Sarah, you tried to watch the first Danzig-directed movie.
Oh, yeah. I really wanted to like it.
Raphael, did you try to watch?
No, because it premiered here in Chicago at the Cinepocalypse Film Festival. And of course, everybody I know went to it. And I had to miss it because I was working at the bookstore that I worked at the time. I worked at the Powell's Books, the Chicago Powell's Books.
Oh.
Yeah. It started around the same time. But anyway, I met up with everybody afterwards and was like, "How was it?" And they were all like, "I don't want to even talk about it."
It's hard to talk about. I mean, I went into it blind. I didn't know anything about it. And Dirk was like, "Hey, would you watch this Danzig movie with me?" And I was like, "Of course. Yes, that sounds great." And then once we got into it, I was like, "Oh, this isn't for me." I don't know who it's for. Danzig, I guess, but not really anybody else.
It seems like that was it. It was by Danzig for an audience of Danzig.
Yes.
Because nobody seemed to even ironically enjoy it on its first screening, which kind of soured me on it. But, maybe I'll check it out at some point.
I watch a variety of stuff, varying qualities, and it just wasn't fun. It felt dirty.
Yeah.
It didn't feel good.
No.
So we didn't even finish it, but maybe someday. But that's not why we're here.
We're not here to talk shit about other punks, because that's what punks do.
Right. Oh, well, I guess we should. Right. Oh, well, I guess we should. Let's start with Billy Joe Armstrong. No. Let's press play on Dudes. We start with dark, moody music in New York City, and then we see the Vandals saying, "I want to be a cowboy." This scene was so cool when I was a kid, and it's still cool now.
I want to be a cowboy. I was born to be a cowboy.
Yeah, like I said, I only saw this once before, and I saw it in the way that punks see it, where you go over to somebody's house, you're staying there for the night, it's in a city that you don't live in, you're crashing on the couch, and my buddy was like, "Did you ever see the cowboy movie that Penelope Spheres did, the punk cowboy movie?" And I'm like, "I have no idea. This sounds insane." And puts it in the VCR, and it starts like that, and I'm just like, this might be the coolest punk movie ever. It just starts out unquestionably punk, and not in a way that even Repo Man or Suburbia starts. This is a punk show. It's in a dingy, is this a warehouse? Is this a club? Where are we? It's a great all guns firing way to start a movie.
Yeah, I love it. John's just punching around. Daniel Roebuck stage dives and nobody catches him. Flea's moshing. The punks, I guess, were really roughing up the actors, which I thought was very funny.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Well, I feel like you can tell that the people that are part of the show, the band and the audience, are real
They're
people.
real.
It wasn't actors, and I think you can tell that. And I don't know if it's just because of this time and we haven't really been able to be at a lot of shows due to the pandemic and everything, but I've seen this movie before, but then as soon as we were rewatching it and I saw it, I was like, oh, I want to go to a show so bad. It just
Yeah.
makes you want to be there. And I think that I didn't grow up in the punk scene necessarily, but I feel like being more of the goth crowd is like punk adjacent. So you're all
Sure.
sort of dressed
You're
similar,
outcasts,
and you're outcasts and you can always relate. You always have buddies, but it wasn't necessarily the kind of shows that I was seeking out. But if my friend wanted me to go, I would totally go. And this really has that perfect vibe. It's like the place, the outfits, everything is so wonderful. Just right away when you have the opening scene of the movie, you're there.
And I just love she put a camera in the pit.
Yeah.
Like in 1987, this was still when Donahue was having shows about moshing with some band on there, some hair metal band or something.
Yeah.
Like this was still like something that people didn't really know about. It was still called slam dancing and stuff. It's just like, oh, this is crazy.
This movie is obviously a punk movie made by a director that is into punk.
Yeah.
And you don't get that a lot at all, ever. And when you do get that, a lot of times it's more about the vibe of punk. Penelope Spheres was like, saw punk, and as a woman of her age, got into it and jumped in, and she's never left it. Her boyfriend is somebody she met while filming Decline of the Western Civilization 3. So this is as authentic as you're really going to get, especially in 1987.
Yeah. Do you have first pit story? Do you remember the first time you were in a pit?
Yeah. So the first punk adjacent anything show that I went to was to see the Ramones were playing with Metallica at the Lollapalooza in 1996, I want to say. And I was young enough that I was like, oh, I've seen this on TV a whole bunch, It's 1996 at that point. Nirvana and Green Day and moshing is on TV and everybody thinks they know what they're doing. And this was at the Rockford, Illinois County Fairgrounds. So it was like the weirdest group of people because everybody had to drive from Chicago to Rockford to see it because there was no actual Chicago date in the city limits for that Lollapalooza tour. And a lot of people went because it's Metallica. Who else played there? Rancid played that year. Soundgarden played. Screaming Trees. It was a really great lineup, but I just remember somebody peed on one of my friends in the pit.
I've never had pee in the pit before.
It was because it's like an outdoor festival. There's nowhere to go. You're standing there and you're like, I got my spot on this like general public, there's no seats, obviously, lawn. And so there's just dudes that have been camped out for all these bands that they do not like because they're there to see Metallica. So some metalhead just like pulled out his dick and pissed on one of my friends while we were like watching the Ramones.
Wow.
I was like, this is it. This is punk. We did it, everybody.
Oh, man. Your poor friends.
Yeah, that is a bummer to be the piss guy.
Because then there's not even anywhere to wash it off. There's no running water or sinks.
Yeah. Exactly. He just had to deal with it until he got home, hours later.
The sacrifices we make.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
My first pit story was at La Luna here in Portland, Oregon. It's now Scotch Lodge, a restaurant.
Oh, I love it there.
Yeah. But
so fancy.
It was a live venue. We had taken the train up to see KMFDM.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was their first U.S. tour, and so we were very small. I think I was barely a sophomore, and everyone there was decked out like this movie. Everyone was real deal punks, hopefully non-racist skinheads, very hard to tell. And
yeah, especially in Portland at the time.
Yeah, I was like from a small town, so I was like, this is incredible. The first band was Chainsaw Kittens. It was just super bass heavy, grunge basically, where I was like, this is when bands would open for bands that didn't sound like them. Korn opened for KMFDM too. Anyway, so then KMFDM came out. Enesh was like 7 foot tall, completely hairless man in a short skirt and giant docks up to his knees. And I was like, what is this? And then the guitarist started playing, Gunter Schultz, and the entire place just became a pit. So there wasn't like a choice of maybe I'll go in the pit. We were just accosted from every angle. And because we were small, people were pitching us up onto the crowd. And so we were ending up on the stage. And Ash like punched me in the chest and I flew off into the audience and landed on somebody's shoulders and rode them like a pony. It was just total madness. We were all beat up the next day. But when I think about how crazy that was, there was also a part where one guy just screamed, "I want to go to hell," and I didn't know that was one of their songs, so I was just like, what is happening in this building? It blew my mind, and so I just always think about that.
Yeah, but it's like moments like that that make being in a subculture like this, if you're into music. I grew up listening to music. Both my parents were we had music in the house all the time, and I went to concerts before I went to punk stuff, and it was, you were super far away from everybody, and it just seemed very inaccessible. You didn't talk to the musicians. You would never see the musicians. To be able to get punched in the chest by one of your favorite musicians is just kind of like, oh, wow, you're on the same level as these people, which is kind of what everybody is, I think, drawn to the community of punk, industrial, goth, ska, skinhead, all that kind of stuff, is that, oh, wow, we're all kind of somehow on the same level.
Right, yeah, because we're all sidelined to the normies, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
I like too in that right after the opening scene when they're like deciding what they're going to do and they're like predicting their new travel future and they're like, let's put our heads together. And Grana's like, my head just got stepped on.
Yeah.
Like...
the scene in the bathroom is very funny.
I'm so sick of doing this. I'm sick of waiting for the world to end.
Me too. Why don't we do something else for a change?
Yeah, like what?
I don't know. I bet we can figure something out if we put our heads together.
My head just got stepped on. I can't think of nothing.
California. Let's move to California.
I got a job. I got responsibilities.
You're washing dishes in a shithole, brother. Personally, I think you could risk the career change.
That definitely wasn't his first mosh pit experience, but he did get trampled for sure.
Yeah. They then go to a restaurant, and Flea says that life's a shit sandwich. And John hits on a punk lady and the bad dude boyfriend. A fight breaks out. It's very chaotic. We don't really know where their love of punk came from, but what came first for you? Was it the music? Was it friends? How did punk find its way into your life?
It was the music, really, because I am just at that cusp age where Nirvana blew up right when I was getting into just music in general. Right when you're at that age where you're finding your own music, you stop just only listening to whatever your parents have on the car radio when you're driving around. So I was watching MTV all the time. And one of the biggest things that happened in a lot of punks my age, because I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, sight was that MTV showed a concert of Green Day. It was a full live Green Day concert that they filmed professionally from 1994, and it was called Jaded in Chicago. And I was like, oh my God, this is happening right here. There's this many punks in Chicago. And I was like, oh, this is a thing that I can go do. I could hop on the train and I could have been at this show. Obviously, my parents would never let me do that. I wouldn't know how to navigate any kind of public transit at the time. But there was a zine that ended up coming out, a pretty popular zine called Jaded in Chicago that you could pick up at every record store. It was one of those free zines that was somewhere in between Vice and a Maximum Rock and Roll or something like that, that was focused specifically on the Chicago punk scene. And I went to some record stores, saw that. I was like, oh, this is like that concert. Oh, this is, and it all kind of coalesced that way that you could just go and see this. And again, at that point, I was already in a dumb band with my friends, and we were just playing Black Sabbath covers and Anthrax covers and just the kind of stuff that some suburban kids play. But then all of a sudden I was like, oh, we need to learn how to play Black Flag songs, because that stuff is not cutting it anymore.
Nice.
I like the scene that they have there in the restaurant, like the Chinese restaurant. And then I think the idea was that it's connected to the music venue. And we have a lot of places like that in Portland where it would be some kind of divey diner, and then either in the basement or right next door. I mean, what ended up now becoming the Doug Fir, which is sort of like a well-known Portland music venue.
Right.
It used to be like the diviest hotel, and it looked almost exactly like that restaurant they're in, where it was round booths. It was a Chinese restaurant, and then the shows were in the basement. And they were, I mean, I don't even think it was like licensed to have people in there. You know, it was you would get some hand-drawn flyer and then you would know to go there. And it was, of course, all ages, because I really don't think we weren't supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. But that's what that scene really felt like to me, was even though they're in New York, it felt like what we had here.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that restaurant, because in 1994, there was another, it's not punk, but there was another industrial show called the Angst Fest. It was KMFDM, Sister Machine Gun, ChemLab, and Diatribe, and you couldn't have picked four more of my favorite things to listen to in 1994. They were playing together, and we showed up at the show early, so we went to that restaurant, and in my brain, it's like the Last Supper of industrial, because I walked in and they were all at one long table eating Chinese food, and it was just like you hear the music. I was like, oh my God, what? And of course, no one else knows who any of those people are. So my friends that I had drugged there are just like, what are you talking about? Because it just looks like a bunch of dirtbags. But
you're like, all my dreams are coming true.
I was like, they're all right there. And they're like, whatever. Okay, you drug us to this thing. But that's funny. I forgot about that. They next howl at the moon while drinking on a fire escape. Grant, or John Cryer, says everything is fucked. I get that they were in a big city, but that's how I felt in a small town. I knew something was happening somewhere, and I wanted to be there, and that's what this road movie does for me, and did for me as a kid, is I was like, I get my friends, we get a car, we get out of here. Like, that's the plan. I just love it. The nihilism of punk, of course, really appealed to me, but it was overrun by my well of sadness, which made me more goth and industrial than punk.
Hey, come on down from there, man. You're gonna get hurt. Everything's totally fucked. Music's fucked. Girls are fucked. We're fucked. No one else is new.
John slips and Daniel's upside down. I love this scene where they're on this pipe. Flea has a broken foot, which is never really addressed in the movie, but he's got a cane, so he pulls them down from there. I love road films so much. I love that in road movies you meet weird characters, and the next scene they give us an Elvis impersonator who's gonna come back, and I just think he's so great. The boys sing Hava Nagila in the car, which is a great bonding moment, and it's also what Penelope pulls from to do Wayne's World, which she talks about in the commentary on the Blu-ray, because people are like, we love that scene with Queen, which I do not, but and she's like, yeah, I just took that from Dudes, the movie nobody saw that I made.
Nagila Hava, Nagila Hava, Nagila Baby in my car.
Oh man, unfortunately Flea has to pee, so they pull over, but we get some rad crane shots, which again is where you're like, oh, the cinematographer is like really fucking great.
I think that's right, where there's like a couple scenes where you realize this looks better than it should. Yeah. And that's definitely one of them, when they stop for a pee break or whatever and they're gazing at the desert. I think they were maybe in Utah at that point or something, but it's just so beautiful and shot so well. It's really great.
I know a lot of people who are like, this really isn't that punk of a movie.
Oh yeah,
because it looks so good. You know, like anything that, especially at the time, Repo Man does not look this good.
Right.
You know, things like that do not. Even They Live, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love John Carpenter, and I consider They Live a punk movie, even though it isn't about punk rock. Does not look as good as this movie.
Right.
This movie has movement. It's, again, like I said, it has no right to look this good.
Yeah, it's really great. And especially now that I have a rip of it on DVD because it wasn't out for so long, and it's still the VHS quality, so it feels super cozy to me. But seeing it on the Blu-ray, I'm like, this thing looks so great. They pull over to have a campfire. Flea says, this time tomorrow we'll be staring at the lights of Hollywood, and he's such a doe-eyed little wonderful tramp. Unfortunately, they're accosted by a motorcycle gang, and And Missoula's there. He's psycho and racist. He's played by Lee Ving. This would be the fear of punks leaving a big city, but assholes like this went to my high school, so I didn't feel like this was that crazy. I was like, they're already here. The boys set chase, and unfortunately Milo slips. He's cornered and killed, something that was really controversial, I guess, in the 1980s. You don't kill a main character, especially the third listed on the call sheet, but they do, leaving Grant and Biscuit to wander the desert. And then John sees the cowboy again, and next the cop's there, but there's no body, so they're not going to do anything about it. So John mouths off, they get taken into custody, and run out of town as the cop says, maybe this wouldn't have happened if you looked like normal folks. So let's talk aesthetics. What flavor of punk was your main experience, would you say?
It was kind of a hodgepodge. One thing I love about punk is that I love drag, and punk is just drag. And so it's these little costumes that are maybe it's not a costume, it's a way of life. I'm sorry, I should have said that. But it's each sub tribe has their very, very rigid aesthetics.
Yes.
If you want to be a crusty, there's a very specific kind of uniform for it. If you want to be a street punk, there's a uniform for it. If you're a ska rude boy, there's a uniform for it. Because I loved all these different styles of music, I kind of had this like weird mishmash hodgepodge of like all these different styles that I would put together. Like I'd be wearing some sort of crust band t-shirt, but also have Chuck Taylors on, which is crust punks don't wear Chuck Taylors. Crust punks wear army boots.
Yes.
They wear Doc Martens, or I'd have the thin suspenders on like a skinhead or like a rude boy, but at the same time have a dyed blue mohawk. And so it had all these different things. Plus I grew up in Chicago in the 80s and the 90s. So the shadow of Wax Trax Records loomed very, very large.
So envious of you.
And so you would have bands on the radio. You would have KMFDM and Ministry on the radio. It would be in between, like you would hear the new Stone Temple Pilots song, and then you would hear a Thousand Homo DJ song. It was crazy. It was like, I didn't realize how lucky I had it at the time. It just was, I thought everybody's local mainstream alternative rock radio station played deep Al Jorgensen and Paul Barker's side band cuts. I thought that was just, yes. Palehead was actually the band that got me really, really into punk.
Oh.
I was more into, I don't really think about that often, but I went and bought a Palehead record because it was an Al Jorgensen band.
Yep.
And I loved, again, Ministry was on the radio and I loved all that stuff. And I bought it, and in it said, featuring hardcore legend. And in the promo, they spelled hardcore CORPS, like Marine Corps.
Yeah, that's great.
So they refer to it featuring hardcore legend Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat. And I was like, I don't know who this Minor Threat is, but I have to go buy the record. And then that was kind of when the schism started happening.
That's so great. From Palehead.
Yeah, but I also was like really into goth stuff. So I was like, I need an oversized coat really badly right now. So I would walk around looking like a freak even at the punk shows, which I love. And that's why I love seeing people that don't necessarily conform even to the conformity of the aesthetics of punk, which I love, though. I love the fact that these are these little kind of drag outfits that you can put on and put off. And if you go to your job, you comb your mohawk over or something like that. I love it all like that.
I loved that also in the 90s, there wasn't Hot Topic and things. So everyone's outfit was just a hodgepodge of what they made or found. Big Bang, shout out to Big Bang, RIP in Portland, Oregon. That was the bastion for us where we would go there and be like, oh my God, look at this coat made out of feather boas or whatever it was, and you just be like, oh my gosh, like, do I wear this? Is this me? Can I put this accessory on? Or go buy studded bracelets at the S&M store, and then you find out it's a cock ring, Spartacus, and that kind of stuff. And I just miss that way of, you'd go to a party and see people and nobody looked the same because they couldn't all buy a Ramones shirt. It's just so different.
Yeah, and everybody had to sew everything on for themselves.
Yeah.
Now you can buy that stuff pre-made, which I will not begrudge anybody for doing that. I mean, I kind of would have. I spent the amount of time I wasted just sewing patches on with dental floss. I wish I had that time back. I'm not going to lie. I would. Maybe it's because I'm about to turn 40, so I say that as somebody who's like, what am I doing at 2:15 on next Tuesday? Because my week is so planned out. But we had a store in Chicago called The Alley that was this one stop, any kind of weirdo alternative culture. So you could buy your studs and your things like that if you were a punk. You could buy your Manic Panic there, leather jackets. They also owned a S&M store that was around the corner.
Nice.
So if you wanted to get the bondage stuff, you could get that there too. And it was a place that, yeah, you would walk in and there'd be like the really scary looking like industrial guy that was there, and then like the really cute goth girl, and then like the totally like wastoid looking punk working. And you would walk up to them and have to ask them the scariest thing in the world, which is, where do I get this one thing? Because the last thing you wanted to do is not look cool and in the know. And I like that kind of gatekeeping is gone. Like that's the one thing I liked about Hot Topics appearing, is that the kind of gatekeepingness of punk left. But maybe I'm just, because I'm older and I romanticize that era, I kind of like that you had to find your own way and embarrass yourself a little bit until you got comfortable. You had to make yourself uncomfortable, even in this weird social outcast group.
Yeah, I think the time and place too that you're describing in Chicago was glamorized here. So even in the movie where they're like going from one place to another place, I think as a young Dirk always had this dream of Chicago and like wanting to go there because of the industrial scene and the music and everything. So that when I met him 15 years later or something, he kept talking about Chicago and I'm like, let's just go to Chicago. Come on, man. And so we went, and of course, none of that was left anymore.
No.
It's really funny. The neighborhood that everything was centered around is the neighborhood that the Chicago Cubs baseball stadium is in. It's Wrigley Field. It's Wrigleyville.
I don't like that at all.
Yeah. So it was really weird because you would go there, and because it was the same thing when I was young, and when I was finally old enough to sneak away and take the train into the city by myself, I was like, I'm going to walk down the street and I'm going to run into Al Jorgensen. I'm going to run into Chris Connolly. This is going to be so cool. And instead, you'd go to the neighborhood, you would find the record store that you knew everything was happening at. You would go to the alley, and then, oh, it's just like a bunch of bros that are drunk at the baseball game.
Yeah.
There's just thousands of drunken frat sports jocks, and you're like, I think, have I been lied to by every record cover
this
that I've
is not
seen?
what I've always wanted.
I'm glad I didn't see that. I would have been so sad.
Yeah, but then you go to the record store, and there is Chris Connolly working, and you're just like, oh, that's really cool. But he was always like the kind of one exception. He was always the coolest, nicest guy.
I agree. Having spoken to him now, which was a lifelong dream, he's the coolest. Well, Biscuit buys a poncho from a little girl at a Navajo market, and they learn that the bad dudes are up the road a ways. John buys one earring, and cue Jane's Addiction's Mountain Song. The boys then come across some of Missoula's men. They're all bloody. A man tells them where to go before he dies, and that's where the boys get their first guns. They pull in to get gas. We meet Mary Stuart Masterson, who is amazing. She warns Biscuit of going into the diner, but they go anyway and get in a really quick fight, instantly punched in the face. Then they leave to stop at a river, which is a great place for us to stop. So we'll be right back after this. Feeding. Everyone's got to do it, even vampires. But if you aren't a vampire, or a baby vampire, then sometimes eating can become so repetitive and boring. Which is where Marshall's Hot Sauce comes in. Liven up any meal with those small batch sauces made from only the freshest ingredients. From the sweet, mild heat of smoked habanero barbecue to the addictive serrano ginger lemongrass, or even my two personal favorites, habanero carrot curry and bird's eye basil. In fact, Marshall's Hot Sauce even has a new line of seasonings, including an incredible barbecue rub, a chicken marinade, and even a volcano sparkle that a vampire could eat. The best part is that you can enter VHS Podcast at checkout for 20% off. That's right, liven up those meals and wake up those undead taste buds at marshallshotsauce.com. That's Marshall's, Haute sauce.com, and enter VHS Podcast for 20% off. And now, back to the show. And we're back! And the boys are in a very cold river. Apparently it was like mountain runoff, so they were numb every time they had to go into this river.
Fuck you!
No, fuck you!
No, fuck you, man!
No, fuck you!
No, oh, fuck you!
No, fuck you!
No, fuck you, man! Shout!
Suddenly a dead deer hits the water, and they know it's Missoula, so they set chase. We get an awesome shootout with the cars. It's really, really cool. Unfortunately, they wreck and luckily run into Mary because there's like 4 people that live in this area. Grant and Mary eat while Biscuit's sleeping. Grant asks her what she's doing here. She says she moved here with her husband, but he left because she's too hardcore. Her character is awesome in this movie. She doesn't take any crap from anybody. She's super autonomous. She teaches him how to shoot guns. She teaches him how to be a man, essentially. It's such a cool character. Even the part where she's a love interest, she grabs him and makes him kiss her. It's not something you see a lot.
She's from Chicago, so.
Oh, well, there we go. You then get to a scene where you see Daniel Roebuck in full Native American garb, and when I say the air was sucked out of the theater when I saw this a couple years ago in Portland, Oregon, the air was sucked out of the theater. Like, when you see him in the outfit and he's doing a voice, wow, it was a lot. I missed it when I was a kid.
Yeah, and the brown face. He's
Yeah.
also in straight up. It's not just he's in the outfit, which later on he is, but in that first weird flashback.
Yo, in the
dream
flashback.
scene.
Yeah.
That dream scene, he's in
Yes.
face.
They painted his face. It's also through a weird blue-purple gel thing, which I think
Yeah.
helps a little bit, but it is something that doesn't age right, and if it wasn't made by these people, I think it would be very bad, but I think you can feel where their heart is and what they're trying to say, and so I don't think it comes across from my point of view. If you disagree, feel free to contact me and let me know your feelings, but still, when I say in the theater, I felt the temperature change, where people were just like, oh no. And I was like,
You're like, are we even allowed to view this?
Yeah.
Like, it's not okay.
It's pretty rough. We then get to see John in his cool outfit set to Simon Steele and the Claw's Vengeance is Mine, which is pretty amazing.
Well, if you're gonna do it, you better do it right.
Then there's another hallucination scene with the cowboy, and Biscuit follows John off into the woods thinking, I don't know, he's up to some sort of game. Oh, game! What a funny thing to say! Raphael, are you ready to play a game? Because it's time to play Punk, Chipmunk, or Badunkadunk. That's right,
Okay.
There's 10 options, and each one is related to either Punk, a Chipmunk, or a Badunkadunk. Number 1, John Simon Ritchie. Is John Simon Ritchie a chipmunk, a badunkadunk, or a punk?
A punk.
That's right, it's a punk. It's Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious didn't have the name Sid Vicious until Johnny Rotten's hamster bit him, the hamster being named Sid, and Ritchie said, Sid's vicious.
Good name.
Hey, thanks.
That's good.
That's some deep research.
I love the story of, we talked about how the Queen scene, I don't like Queen either. I don't really like Freddie Mercury.
No.
But he once referred to Sid Vicious as Simon Ferocious in an interview.
Oh, that's pretty great.
and I think that is a even better punk name than Sid Vicious.
Yeah, Simon Ferocious. Number 2, David Cross. Is David Cross a punk, got a sweet badunkadunk, or is he a chipmunk?
I don't know how to answer this question. I would say he is a chipmunk.
That's right. He's in 3 chipmunk movies, including The Squeakquel and Chipwrecked.
But how's this badonkadonk?
We don't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's never been filmed on camera. Number 3, juvenile. Is juvenile related to punk, chipmunks, or badonkadonks?
Oh, most definitely Badonkadonks.
That's correct. Back That Ass Up was a hit in 1999. Thank you, juvenile. Number 4, penis landscape. Is penis landscape a chipmunk, a punk, or a badonkadonk?
I mean, it's definitely punk, but it might be Badonkadonk as well.
That's right. It's a close one. I tried to throw a tricky one in there. It's a piece of art by H.R. Geiger made for the Dead Kennedys album Frankenchrist. So everyone go on safe mode and Google penis landscape. It's really something. Number 5. Uses loud chirps to express occupied territory dominance or warn their youngs of danger. Is that a badonkadonk, a punk, or chipmunk?
You know, I know the correct answer is probably chipmunk, but that could very well be punks as well.
That's right. But for the sake of this conversation, chipmunks.
Mm-hmm.
There it is. Number 6. DJ Assault. Is DJ Assault chipmunk related, punk related, or badonkadonk related?
Very Badonkadonk related.
Correct. With his hit Ass and Titties, DJ Assault is related to badonkadonks. Not in any of the chipmunk movies. Number 7. Drunk with Power. Punk, chipmunk, or badonkadonk?
Punk.
That's right. Discharge wrote the song on their album Hear Nothing, See Nothing, Say Nothing. One of your favorite groups?
I love Discharge.
Yeah.
I actually last night watched a entire mini YouTube documentary about the D beat, the drum beat, specifically
Whoa.
just the drum beat used by Discharge.
Deep cut. Wowzers. Number 8. Pouches inside their cheeks in which they store food. Is that badonkadonks, chipmunks, or punks?
Chipmunks? I almost said chippunks.
Chipmunks.
But I'm sure many punks that hop in dumpsters wish they could do the same thing.
That's true. That's very true. Number 9. Who said, I know things are getting tougher when you can't get the top off the bottom of the barrel. Is that a chipmunk, a punk, or a badonkadonk?
That is a punk.
That's a punk. Bonus points if you can tell me who said it.
Jesse Michaels from Operation Ivy.
There you go, people. Street cred. It's so hard not to say that line in the cadence that he says it too, because it's just etched in my brain from my friend. My friends played Op Ivy so much that I know every word to the album, never owned it.
I think they are kind of the last truly cult canon punk band that even if you weren't in, like my metalhead friends, they're like, yeah, we know Operation Ivy. I'm like, how? They're like, because everybody played it all around. You didn't have to own it. It was just in the water, in the way like that the Ramones kind of were, or the Sex Pistols.
Yeah, that's a great point. Number 10, final one. Here we go. A group of this is called a scurry. Is it a scurry of badonkadonks, a scurry of punks, or a scurry of chipmunks?
It's a scurry of chipmunks.
That's
I think.
correct. You're an expert on punk and chipmunks. Who would have thunk it?
You got them all right.
You win.
Yes.
Well done. The
Yes.
boys, however, don't win. They arrive at a ghost town, but Missoula is gone. So they drink Elvis's hooch, and we get another hallucination scene. There's a lot of hallucinating that happens in this movie.
I mean, they're punks. Makes sense.
That's true. Yeah, and they indiscriminately drink whatever.
I know,
which is
that's
also what I
that is
saw
my
punks
favorite
do.
part. They're just like, we don't know what it is, let's drink it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all been there.
Yep.
Yep. the guy who gave it to me looked cool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, who knows what's going to happen, but we're in it together.
And also, it tastes bad, but they keep drinking it, which was also something everybody did at some point in their life. Where they're like, I don't know, it's taking us somewhere.
Yeah. Here goes.
I love these moments of camaraderie. I also love that they always involve drinking in this movie. I think that very much fits with these friends and where they're at and what's going on in their lives. They awake and head to a small bar where John hears Missoula, and he tells him which one of them is the ugliest. This is a great scene. John just seems so intense, but he's so baby-faced at the same time. I just love it so much. They go to a theater where a Western's playing, and we get a shootout while there's a shootout in the theater. It's just so clever. And the concession lady looks bored, like she's seen it all before, which is super great. They get arrested, go to prison, and we get the old guy saying, I want my MTV. He says they take requests. They say, do you know Dead Kennedys? And he said, the Kennedys are dead?
Hey, fuzzball!
Shut up, Hezekiah.
If you love somebody, If you love someone, set them free.
Will you shut up?
Well, I play requests, you know.
Yeah? How about Holiday in Cambodia by the Dead Kennedys?
Are the Kennedys dead? What a bummer.
This is really great. He later on sings Wall of Voodoo's Mexican Radio, which was a song my friend Aaron and I found after this movie, and we were like, oh my god, we know the thing that's from the thing. This dude's Vance Kolig. He's also in UHF, The Boys Next Door, Barfly, and Big Top Pee-wee. Anytime this dude popped up in these movies in the 80s, my friend Aaron and I were like, there he is! Like, he was such a cool dude.
He's my favorite. He has one scene in UHF that is my favorite gag in any movie ever.
Is it the penny?
And
what part is it?
they're just panning by, and he's sitting on a bench with a blind guy, and the blind guy is trying to figure out a Rubik's Cube, and the blind guy just turns it and holds it up, and the guy goes, nope. And then he turns it again, nope. And it's just a 2-second gag, and I lose it every single time.
That's so funny. The boys are in the slammer, the gun shop gets raided, the cops head out, Missoula kills one of the cops. The first sheriff that he blows away is John Densmore, who's the drummer from The Doors, which is pretty amazing. And they're going to kill the guys, but Mary hooks up a chain and blasts them out of the jail. This leads to the final shootout that happens at a factory that Lee Ving wouldn't go in because somebody told him there might be asbestos in it. And in the 80s, I guess asbestos was a big thing. So if you're keeping track, Lee Ving did have a fear, and it wasn't just his band, it was asbestos. So it doesn't really hurt the film, I don't think. You can't really tell that he wasn't in the scene, but you can definitely feel like the cinematography is a little bit different, the way that they had to cut around it. And the shootout is very short, but I also think the runtime of this film is so lean and nice that it didn't need to be longer. They face off, John gets wounded, Witherspoon, the guy from he's the cowboy. He's there with the Native Americans. And then Milo shows up again, and we see Flea ride off in his leather jacket with the coffee cups on the shoulders, which I love that. And then we get a freeze frame on Mary, Dan, and John. And then we get a cut scene to the credits where the boys are in their outfits and they're playing Outlaw. And it's such a cool way to end the movie because it's like, you already ended it. And then she's like, remember how cool these guys were? And just gives it to us again in the credit scene. Which brings us to final thoughts. So, Raphael, any final thoughts on Dudes?
You know, I'm glad I watched it again, and I'm gonna say controversially, I didn't really like the movie. I think it was messy. I liked everything that they were trying to do in it, and it was fun. It was entertaining. I think John Cryer simultaneously does a great job in this movie, but he's just too. I don't believe him as a punk.
Yeah.
He's John Cryer. He's just coming off of being Ducky in Pretty in Pink, and maybe that's just coloring me. I'm like, he seems a little too new wave to be a punk, to be this kind of punk. But this is a great movie, especially in the canon of Penelope Spheris, because you see this is like the perfect beginning bridge between her early stuff that was so story-based and not very cinematic to her later stuff, which is very, very cinematic and not very story-based. Black Sheep is a great movie. The story is less important than capturing the energy of Chris Farley and David Spade on camera. Wayne's World, again, is more about capturing that rock and roll energy. And it's cool like that. I really, really like it. And it looks great. This movie looks great, but this is the weirdest of all the American punksploitation movies, I think, because it's not quite a Western. It's not quite a punk movie. It's surprisingly heavy metal. Like, there's so much weird stuff going on.
The soundtrack is bizarre, considering we start off with the Vandals, and then a lot of the other music, I was like, what is this? What genre? She knows punk, so it's really weird in that way.
Yeah, the soundtrack seems very studio notes. Punk, we're not going to sell any punk records. We need to get that heavy metal stuff. That's what the kids are starting to listen to.
Yeah, and that's part of why this film didn't get a wide release, is because they were just like, none of this is mainstream. The Western aspect wasn't going to sell it. The punk aspect wasn't going to fill the seats. It just didn't get supported at all. And it got a minor VHS release because people just didn't believe in it. And so it's nice that people are finding it now, and I think that it's finding its cult status partly because of Penelope Spheris. I don't think anyone watched 3.5 Men and was like, what's dudes? But, you know.
Right. But yeah, I think it's a fun movie. I'm glad I watched it, but am I going to watch it again? Maybe again in another 15 years, I guess was the last time I watched it. Yeah. So
you don't have to watch it again. I will. I've seen it hundreds of times and I'll watch it again. But Sarah, what about you? Any final thoughts on Dudes?
Well, I liked this movie. I think it's fun. I think I'd watch it again. I think there's a lot of things that come up for me as someone who's experienced the same feelings. I know what it's like to drive into a small town on a road trip and be afraid to get out of the car, or just be able to look at who's in a restaurant and be like, this really isn't the place for me.
Yeah.
I know that feeling, and so I think it really came across in the movie, and so I liked that. And the same with the shows and just not having a purpose. Like, I feel like they both are trying to figure it out, and then when they figure out that their purpose is to kind of fight for the underdog that nobody cares about, I love that message, and I know that message. Those were some of my favorite parts around the movie. We talked about a little bit of things being problematic, and I think that for sure I could focus on that, but that's where I want to leave it. It's just that I love the messages of finding something you care about, fighting for it, not fitting in, and that's okay. You find your place somewhere else.
Yeah, I also think, it's kind of a vibe movie. And I really think it's consistent in its vibe. Even like Penelope says, the tone switches when Milo's murdered, but that kind of propels the story from that point. And like you said, they're going to fight for their underdog friend, which I think any of us outcasts feel like we have to do that for everybody that isn't sort of the way the world seems made for normal people. But, it's like I would hear about somebody that took their life. I didn't even know that person, but then it makes me sad because I'm like, this is who we should have been championing, who we should have been fighting for. The world doesn't feel like it's built for us, but we're finding our way and carving our own way and supporting each other. And that's what these friends do in this movie. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
And he's a sweet boy, the last things he says to his friends is, good night, buddies, love ya, like we're going on this cool trip. And then he gets murdered by some jerks. I think that is the way the world works sometimes. And I think that it can easily be like, especially when we're in this time where it's like the police aren't going to do anything. They don't care. They don't care about us. They don't care about that our friend is dead. And so we have to do this. So do I think that people should go out and be vigilantes and have guns and find? No, absolutely not. But I like the message that if people are treated unjustly, we should do something about it. And especially if it's people that no one cares about. I think the message of this movie carries over.
Yeah. If something you see is not right, you should do something.
Dude something.
That brings us to final thoughts. These are questions just about yourself. What is a good day for you, punk-wise?
Punk-wise? Nowadays? Nowadays, it's reading a book about punk and having the whole day to just digest it. A couple of years ago, it would be getting up and riding my bike to the record store and flipping through a bunch of records that I couldn't afford to buy, and then biking to the liquor store because apparently I still had money for booze.
Yeah, I was going to say, hold on a second.
Like most punks, they have money to go to the liquor store, but they don't have the $5 for the DIY show when they show up. And then catching some weird show that's either in a basement or in a loft or in a bowling alley or some other place that should not, for any safety or legal reasons, be having a show. Yeah, that would be a great day.
We had a place in Eugene called Icky's Tea House, and it was not a tea house, and it would have punk shows, and the shows were all $2, or if you didn't have money, they'd just let you in. I went to one show that was 75 cents one time, and everyone would just drink in the parking lot outside of it. It was basically what it was a parking lot where people would drink, and then you'd wander in sometimes to see what band was playing. But that was a good old Icky's Tea House. What advice do you have for someone maybe interested in punk. Maybe somebody that just sees the Green Day or the whatever, Offspring or something, and then wishes to know more.
Go to the record store. Record stores are back, which is really nice.
Yes.
It's very, very nice to have a place where you can go and find people to talk about stuff like that. And the really great thing about record stores now is that it's not that kind of bastion of snobbery that it was, I think, when we were younger trying to get into things, where you would literally get scoffed at by some people, and that happened to me and it kind of turned me off. And I think that people nowadays, if you see somebody that's punk's not cool. It's back to not being cool anymore. And goth and industrial it's more popular than it was a couple of years ago, but it's become a lot more accessible. People are much more open arms, like, yeah, there's room for everybody. So go talk to somebody. If you see somebody dressed kind of cool, say hi to them. Maybe, I don't know how social medias work with that kind of stuff. I'm not going to pretend, but yeah, go to the record store, buy a punk record, ask somebody, hey, I like this band. What other bands sound like this band? And eventually you'll be the person telling the other person what to listen to.
I like that a lot. I love record stores. This is my first job after a video store was a record store, and I was going to work every day just to recommend music to people was almost as good as recommending movies to people.
It's the best. It's the best.
Awesome. Well, Raphael, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching Dudes and coming on here to talk about punk and chipmunks.
I'm surprised you didn't talk about Chipmunk Punk, the Alvin and the Chipmunks punk album.
Well, I didn't want to give it any press, but since you brought it up.
But they've spray painted a wall on the cover. They're out of control.
They are. Who bought that? Don't you have to sign like in a book or something to buy spray paint these days?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can't even buy it in the city of Chicago. You can't buy it within city limits.
There you go. How did these chipmunks...
suburbs.
They are punk if they're going around that kind of tomfoolery. Oh my gosh. Sarah, thank you for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here for this season 9.
Yeah, it's been a great season. It went fast, I feel like.
It did.
Yeah, Sarah, I have a little quick thing that ties into my punkness and your hot sauces.
Ooh, let's hear it.
A few years ago, on one of the last bigger tours that I went on, I made a bunch of hot sauce that I canned to give as gifts to all the punks that we stayed with on the tour as a thank you for letting us stay at their places. And so I got very, very into making hot sauces for a while.
That's so lovely. I'm very into it. It's what I do every day.
And
I make sauces and give them to all my punk weirdo friends.
That's true. And you not only made a hot sauce, but you canned it, which is the other thing you're super passionate about.
Into it. I like it.
That's great. I recommend people give hot sauce to punk rockers all the time.
Everybody loved it. It was... Everybody lost their minds because, you leave a thank you note or, you leave a 6-pack or something like that. I was like, here's a garlic hot sauce for you. And here's a fruity hot sauce for you. People were like, I don't understand why you're doing this, but I never had a better gift from a band. I'm like, yes.
One time I lost my wallet I had put it on the top of my car and it was like... It ended up bouncing down the street off the top of my car, and these punk rockers happened to pick it up, and they ended up living in this house that's for the last 20 years, it's just always been a punk rocker house. I don't ever not know someone who's lived there or know what it is. They called Dirk because he was the first name, and because my wallet is also my phone, like all my cards and money are inside of my phone. So they called Dirk to be like, hey, we found your wallet bouncing down Hawthorne right by our house. So I brought them hot sauce to give them because they had found my wallet and called us. And as I was driving away, and I'm like, thank you guys so much. This is so rad. You didn't have to call me. I love it. As I'm driving away, they opened up the hot sauce and we're just each taking drinks out of it. I wish I had
porch.
it. Yeah, it's so ingrained in my mind. It's on their punk rock porch, just taking swigs of my hot sauce. And I was so happy and they were so happy. It was a very wonderful moment.
That is by far the best endorsement you'll ever get for hot sauce.
It was so good.
Yeah. I also just love that it's so punk that they're just like, why would I put it on food? I'll just drink it on the porch.
Take a swig. Come on, let's do it.
This is food.
Yeah, this counts. This would be perfect with my Crooked Eye I'm drinking or whatever. Well, thank you again so much. Generation Splice Podcast is the podcast. Giallo Biafra on Twitter. Do you have new episodes coming out regularly still?
Yeah, we've been on a little bit of a break because my mom has been having to move. But yeah, we have an episode coming up on being John Malkovich.
Oh, great.
And we're going to be doing one on Pee-wee's Big Adventure soon. So it'll be good. It'll be fun.
Excellent. Cool. Well, thank you all for listening. This is the last episode of Season 9, so we're going to take a little break and then be back with a new theme and all kinds of fun stuff. So once again, I'm Dirk Marshall, and this has been VH Us.
Good night, you crazy knuckleheads.